Guys, welcome back to my YouTube page. I'm glad you've checked in today. Today I want to talk a little bit about Thailand and Thai culture, comedy, and the experience that I've had living here now for on and off for about 3 years. So Thailand is in Southeast Asia. Anybody with any basic geographical knowledge will obviously know that. It's ridiculously hot here. The cuisine is amazing. The people are in general fairly welcoming, fairly nice, fairly pleasant to be around. But from my personal experience, that kind of changes to some extent after about 6 months to a year. In regards to people, that is obviously the culture is what it is, and obviously the weather is what it is, and things are what they are, and some things obviously don't change and won't change. But there's a lot of amazing qualities to this country, amazing things. I've met some wonderful people here. I've had some wonderful experiences with strangers and people I've sort of got to know a little bit. Some really wonderful human beings. Obviously, there is in every country. But there's something about the culture here, I think. Something about the political climate as well that seems to have a rather, I don't want to say negative, although that is true just to a certain degree, certainly has an impact on people. The very fact that you can't criticise the royal family, for example, is one of those things. Although to some extent, I don't necessarily think that that's a completely bad thing, but I don't think that that's helpful. I think in the long term, or even in the short term, I think that I think most things should be open to criticism, and to ridicule, and to just be open to questioning, really. But unfortunately, there's a lot of poverty in this country. Well, it certainly used to be. Obviously, it still exists today, but it's not quite as much as it used to be. In fact, probably I would say a good 60 to 70% of the people in this country now, of the population, would probably be seen, deemed to be somewhat branded with the working class badge. Back in, if we're looking at, sticking labels on people, that's probably what they would be classed as. British people probably would see a lot of people here as sort of, upper working class or middle class or whatever. And that's because of the lifestyle that a lot of Thai people have, with, fairly decent jobs, a car or two, a nice house, a fair amount of savings in the bank. Of course, there's obviously a good proportion of people here that obviously don't have those things, and you tend to find that a good proportion of the people that are poor in Thailand tend to live in the northeast of the country, in places like Isan, Well, of course, is there in Bangkok and other parts, other provinces in the country that have their fair share of problems, social problems, financial issues. But that brings me on to corruption. There is an unbelievable amount of corruption in this country, and I'm look. England is a corrupt country in many ways. It's just a different. It's kind of in some ways it's a sort of. It's still the same. There's underhanded, very sly. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in England, and that applies here too in Thailand. But although to be fair, Thailand probably I think Thailand's economy, well, it used to be pretty strong. It's been going downhill steadily over the last couple of years. But I think overall, when you compare it to countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, even Malaysia, maybe to some extent China as well, you could say that it's not doing too bad. Well, obviously China is on the rise, and that's something that's going to have a huge knock-on effect for this country in a couple of years' time. And I would certainly, I think it's well, certainly not fair to say, but I think we will see sort of chewing up of the smaller countries that surround Thailand. Unfortunately, once China becomes sort of the powerhouse. I mean, it's already a powerhouse, but in regards to relationship with the Western world, but I think you're going to see some pretty ruthless business tactics with once China starts to have more control of a trade between sort of Southeast Asian countries, or has more influence, has influence on the whole ASEAN project. We'll see what happens there, but anyway. But yeah, there's just a shocking amount of corruption in Thailand. There really is. It's a shame. It's very sad that corruption exists within the police, exists within immigration here. It exists within the government, and also there's a lot of gangs and sort of what are called the mafia. In places like Pattaya and in Bangkok too. It's a developing country. Even though it's highly westernized now in many ways, it's still a developing country, and it has a long way to go. I'm not trying to paint some sort of picture that I despise this country. That's not what this is about at all. If I'd completely hated living here, if I didn't like it, I would just get on a plane and fly home. Having done that, and having come back to the country, obviously I've had more of a frame of reference. I'm not just traveling around. I sort of just as the years have gone on, I've sort of seen more and experienced more. I just sort of feel like I've got more of like anybody that lived in a country for a while, and it's not, once that sort of initial period passes by, you start to see things differently. Maybe, and you could say, well, that's just your mentality, that's just your attitude towards things, and maybe that's the case, or maybe it's, but that's just that you just finally starting to see the reality of what's going on around you. In regards to comedy in Thailand, I think one of the reasons that it's very, very much a slapstick type kind of based humour, almost childlike really, is I think that's partly because of the the sort of, I mean, obviously it's part of cultural development over the years, of course. But it's also because of the types of things that tie people, the types of conversations and the sort of social nuances and the sort of dynamics of in Thai culture and in between within Thai family situations and family dramas, family politics. But some of the things that Thai people find funny, which is obviously, and all this can obviously be said for British humour, because obviously British humour is obviously an aspect of British culture, and but I think in Europe, or certainly in England, in my opinion, that the humour is more diverse. But I also not. But that's probably because of the fact that England's been a pretty open country in many regards, and it wasn't so much. It didn't used to be so politically correct that it unfortunately is now. But I think in Thailand, some of the of course, there's different types of humour, and I'm not trying to stereotype or generalise here, but just based on the things that I've seen and I've watched, it does seem to me that it's very, it's more about mocking, and there's a lot of, it's almost kind of like some sort of slapstick stuff from the 70s. Or even the 60s, sort of British, sort of 60s British 70s or 70s type humour. Sort of think of things like sort of like the Goodies and that sort of style of humour, sort of very sort of full of, you know, like sort of weird sound effects and just sort of very you know, sort of primary school type. Things that sort of primary school or even teenagers would kind of like would be attracted towards, which I think says a lot about the sort of Thai mentality. I think it's of course that's not, obviously there's exceptions and not every Thai person is the same, obviously, but I think it's just because of the sort of, even though Thailand is open in many regards, it's also very restricted. It's also quite a censored country. Very I don't know if insular is the right word, but in some ways it's not a sort of very outward looking, and I think that's because of what Thailand's got to offer in regards to sort of natural beauty and well, certainly used to have. It used to be more popular than it is now, probably because of the exchange rates with the pound and the dollar. So it used to be a lot more busier than it. Well, actually, in some ways it's more busy now, and in other ways it some places used to be a lot busier than they are now. But that's because of a clamp down on the immigration's clamped down on visas and stuff. But the Thai style of comedy is quite, it's very intriguing to very interesting to watch it as a well, like anything, you know, when you're outside of your own culture, you're you're faced with things that challenge your own perceptions of humour. And earlier I said it was kind of like a childish. That's just. I was trying to think of the right adjectives to use, the right way to describe it, and that's kind of really the first thing that came into my head, really. But that's kind of based on what, in some ways, what I deem to be. So obviously, again, like we always do, making a judgment on it based on what I deem to be sort of more mature, sensible comedy, or even what I to some extent consider to be comedy for adults. Of course, some of the comedy in Thailand is obviously not meant for adults. It's meant for sort of young, really for children, really, or sort of mid to late teens. But I just kind of wanted to talk about sort of just some of the observations. Really, I just found it very interesting that it's so well, and this kind of applies for the music as well. It's there's a lot of music I like in Thailand. Some of the most beautiful music is the sort of more traditional sort of Isan style type of music with sort of traditional instruments, and I think that's one of the things that really appeals to me about Thailand is the real Thai people, in my opinion, the real sort of the true Thais are the people that are really, yeah, the people that live in or around the Isan provinces, really, up in the north and the northeast. And you can see that when you go to those provinces, you can see that the some of the old ways of life are still being being respected and carried out and lived out in even in this super modern time. Well, compared to some of the things some of the ways and sort of traditions that exist in those communities. But of course, Thailand, I have to talk about Buddhism because obviously Buddhism is a huge part of Thai life, and you know the temple and the sort of ritual, but the it's a habit, really. It's just a normal part of life here. Just like, you know, going to a church in Christian or Catholic dominated country, or predominantly Christian or Catholic country, would people going to church or chapel in them countries would do there. It's just a normal part of life. But I also think that that's one that kind of it's Buddhism has had a obviously Thailand has had a huge influence from India, China, to some extent Myanmar, Malaysia, Japan, and Portugal and France, really. And you can see that in certain areas that you go to, even some of the architecture, the fact that there's some fruits that were available here that a couple of hundred years ago weren't. Some things were introduced here. In fact, even even regards to the cuisine, some of the most popular dishes here, like pad thai, pad see ew, were originally Chinese dishes, but obviously over the many years have been altered and sort of become uniquely Thai, really. But really, the Thai people themselves were really sort of a subgroup, really, of a couple of groups that existed. I believe it was in southern China, that started to move south. I think it might be 700-800 years ago, maybe longer than that. I'm probably way off there. Apologies for that. But yeah, Thailand had a Thailand's history in regards to cuisine, art, the temple, the Buddhism lifestyle, what Buddhism really means to Thai people here. It's an incredible thing. It really is part of people. It's it's like an extension of the body, really. Thailand is an incredible country. It really is. It's a very beautiful place. I love the seasons here. The monsoon seasons are just amazing to see. The power of nature in this country is incredible. But there's just and that this video seems like I'm just sort of, like I have nothing positive to say or nice to say about Thailand, which is not the case. The reason I'm saying I've said some of those things is because I just feel sorry for this country. I feel sorry for so many people here that that are just living their lives, they're just going about their daily, their daily routines, their daily, their careers, their jobs, their life, trying to raise children, trying to do the right thing, and just a sort of there's just so many things around them that they can't do anything about. They feel helpless, and like I said earlier, there's just so much, just such a depth of corruption in this country. It's going to take decades to resolve some of those issues, if some of them ever get resolved. I know I understand the link and the addiction almost with image and Buddhism here, and it's in some ways it seems very pretentious. It seems very false sometimes, but and obviously people exist here that are very, very much just very shallow human beings, but obviously you can say that about every country. So, but overall, it's a country, like I said earlier, it's a country on its way up, really, slowly but surely, and I'm very lucky to be here, and that's really what I wanted to say really about this country. I'm probably going to make a couple of videos about Thailand, but yeah, the overall, the culture here is incredible, and it's just obviously just to say this really is, you have to be careful when you travel. You have to be a little bit reserved about being very reserved actually, to try and prevent yourself from being too judgmental, to being too critical. Not necessarily negative criticism, but to overly analyse everything that you see around you, because you're not going to understand everything, no matter how much you learn about the culture, no matter even if you learn a language, no matter how many history books, there's always going to be things that you don't understand fully, or you may never understand. And of course that applies for Thai people when they go to other countries. They will never understand. If a Thai person goes to England, they will never completely understand England and everything that's part of English culture, or what used to be, or British culture, whatever you want to call it. After all, some people don't even believe there is such a thing as English culture, British culture, which I completely disagree. England's had a massive, long, incredible history, just like Thailand has in many ways. But they're very different countries, and that's what you have to accept. They're very different, but they do have some similarities, and I'll talk about that in the next video. So thank you very much for checking in today, and I hope you'll check in again in the next video. So thank you very much for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.